Hello and welcome to 3ABN Today. My name is C.A. Murray, and let me please thank you once again for sharing this part of your day with us and for inviting us into your homes, your businesses, hopefully and prayerfully into your hearts as we together talk about the things of God. We're going to talk about prison ministry. Now, before you set your mind and say, oh boy, we're going to talk about prison ministry, I want you to free yourself, to disabuse yourself from anything you've thought or heard about prison ministry, because this particular program is not your, dare I say, classic prison ministry program. We're going to talk about some new paradigms, some doing some things in new ways. I'm very, very excited. Sometimes you meet people who are so full of their subject and have so much energy that they are infectious, if I can use that terminology. So we want you to prepare yourself for a different kind of prison ministry program. One, because my guest works actually in the prisons. Two, he's an ex-Marine. So we're going to talk with a guy with a lot of energy, with who's on fire for the Lord, and who really is cutting some new ground and doing some new things in prison ministry. My guest is Keith Johnson. Keith A. Johnson, good to have you here.
Thanks to be here, Pastor C.A.
We have been talking, and this is a guy who is full of his subject, who really knows that of which he speaks. And we really want you to draw up close, because this is going to be an extremely interesting program, because he's got a lot to say. And we want to dive right into it. Before we do that, want to go to some music just before we sort of unpackage his personal story and then what he's doing in California that is really a kind of paradigm for great prison ministry. Good buddy of mine from New York, Robinson Altino, is going to be playing I Want Jesus to Walk With Me. Well done. Nerva and Robertson are two brothers from New York, Haitian-born, who God has blessed in a great way, who have great gifts at piano. Actually, Robertson is a little better on the organ than the piano. His brother is the claim to fame pianist, but they're good guys. My guest is Keith Johnson, who informs me that there really is no such thing as an ex-Marine. I was incorrect. He said an ex-Marine is like ex-pastor. Since you're never really an ex-pastor, you're not an ex-Marine. So he's still a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine, and once a pastor, always a pastor. Want to get right into your story, man, because you, first of all, you've had a full life. Give us a little flavor of growing up in your home, because this kind of sets the foundation for what we're going to talk about. But what was it like growing up in your home?
Well, I grew up in Chicago. I'm a product of a broken home. Mm-hmm. My mother was married 4 times, technically 3 times, and my father 5 times. That's called role modeling. Mm. So I only wanted to be married once, and even I couldn't pull that off.
Yeah.
So, but when I joined the church, I finally asked, "Lord, you pick," because I tend to get iron pyrite. and so we've been married now going on 30 years, right?
Oh, praise the Lord.
My wife is back home, and I've got to get her here sometime because the world has to hear her sing, because she has pipes. But I grew up in the streets. I went to a parochial school early. We were in a 1-room in the basement of a church from 1st to 3rd grade. We had 1 pastor, 42 kids, 8 grades. He had the whole school 2 grade levels ahead.
Wow.
So when you're in 1st grade and you go to 2nd grade, but you're here in sophomore year, freshman year, 8th, 7th, 6th, every time you move to the next grade, it makes sense what you're hearing. So education is an adventure. So no one was ever tardy and no one was ever absent for illness, because school was fun. We moved I had to go to public school in 4th grade, so I had to redo 4th and 5th grade. My mother wouldn't let us be double promoted, so the first 3 words I experienced in public school was detention, suspension, and expulsion.
Oh, wow.
So we went from true education to indoctrination, and then I dug in my heels, because I had tasted, what a true teacher and the gift of teaching is, plus spirituality. And now we're doing arbitrary authority. And I started resisting force, fear, intimidation, manipulation. They made a mistake of teaching me, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. The Marine Corps modified it, and that's a death wish. But for thou art with me, that tells me at 5 years old, I am to be intimidated by nobody, and when I die, I'm to die free. And so my stepfather would beat my mom till she lost an eye, and then the beatings would come downhill, and they'd be waving pistols at us. The police would come, and then new stepfather would come in. Then my sisters are being incested and molested and raped, and another stepfather, and my little brother's incested, and he's gay. And my wife says, they're not gay. They're not happy, and he's not. But so you have all this rage.
So pretty dysfunctional upbringing.
Yeah, but you have all this hate inside, and you don't know what to do with it. So when you're out in the streets, and I would never start a fight, but then I'm a kamikaze pilot coming once you start it. So my friends knew I was crazy, so I got a lot of breathing room. And that's all I wanted, was just leave me alone. But I graduated lower 10% of my high school class out of about 4,000 kids or so, and on purpose. Because I would learn what I wanted to learn, but I wasn't playing the indoctrination thing. And then when I came out, I went in the Marines because it made more sense to die in a rice paddy at the hands of an assumed enemy than the emotional death I was dying, at home. And in the Marine Corps, God was waiting for me. It was unbelievable how He was there for me. And then I came out on the GI Bill. I got an early out, and I had a top secret clearance. But then I moved to California, and I got my BA in business. And tardy and cutting school, was well ingrained with me. So I had to get over that because quarters come pretty hard. But I graduated, and then I got divorced again, and then I said, Lord, take my life. I'll follow truth wherever you lead. Just take my life. And if you want to be married, you have to pick. And then he brought me my wife of almost 30 years now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Keith, and just interrupt you there. How did you, because pretty rough upbringing, you're in the Marines, you're out of the Marines. When did you sort of get hooked up with the Adventist Church? How did that come into your life?
I went, at 13 years old, being an abused child, Jesus was a kindred spirit to me. He was getting abused by those who were supposed to love him. I'm getting it from those who were supposed to love me. And so I said, what can I give Jesus? And I said, what would I want? I said, I would want the heart of my parents. So I went to bring him a heart of a Jew. So I went to all my Jewish friends and I go, how come you guys go to church on the wrong day? It wasn't pretty. I got hit by so many Bible texts. It was like a Gatling gun. So I have to go back to my pastor now. And I go, when's the true Sabbath? And he goes, Saturday. And I go, why do we keep Sunday? He says, for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I go, and I'm 13, and I go, is God the same then, now, and always? And he says, yes. And I said, then show me in the Bible where it says, keep the Saturday Sabbath until after the death of the Messiah, and then keep Sunday. And he goes, I can't. But I need Bible texts because I have to go back and parlay their Bible texts. Yeah. And he goes, this is what we believe. And I'm going, doesn't that bother you that you're superseding God? Because you're going to be held accountable for teaching less than the truth.
Now, you were how old at this point? 13. And you're giving this pastor this kind of lecture?
Well, I was taught, if you go up against an adult one-on-one, you're going to crash and burn to authority, and you're going to go down empty-handed. But if you ask in a crowd, at least you get the answers, and you're going to crash and burn later empty-handed. But, so I have to get truth because I have to bring Jesus a heart. And he's standing in my way. He either has the information or he doesn't.
Or he doesn't, yeah.
And I want truth.
Okay.
Because my mom was a stickler for truth. But she would always say, don't do as I do, do as I say. And you go, no, you're supposed to be a role model. But anyway, so I'm principled because of the discipline I got in the spiritual, like train a child in the way he should go.
Sure.
And I got that early, but I'm still holding my pastor accountable. Then my Baptist friends ran me over for sprinkling babies. So I'm back on him again. And then we had to learn the Apostles' Creed. And the Apostles' Creed showed me the state of the dead because it says he's coming to judge the quick and the dead.
Yes.
And so I asked him, I go, how come the dead are judged twice? Because he says as soon as you die, your soul goes to heaven or hell. There's no such thing as purgatory. The Catholic Church made it up. And I'm saying, but why are the dead judged twice? And he's going, what are you talking about? I says, well, as soon as I die, if my soul goes to heaven or hell, I'm judged. But the Bible in that Apostles' Creed says, coming to judge the quick and the dead.
Yes.
And so if it should read, he's coming to judge the quick.
So you managed to get some fair amount of Bible knowledge and contact, even growing up in what was a pretty wild childhood. You were able to glean some Bible understanding, and you kind of had an idea what the Bible certainly was all about, and a fairly early developed sense of right and wrong, do and don't, what you ought to be doing and what ought not to be happening.
I was schizophrenic. Because I would get up in the morning and say, God, I'm gonna be holy today, and I couldn't get past the breakfast table when my sister hit the table.
Yeah.
I'm going, well, I got to wait till tomorrow and start, make another commitment. And then they would tell me, be good, love God, or go to hell. And I had a hard time with that one.
Yeah.
It's like telling my wife, be faithful, love me, or I'll kill you, and expect a relationship to come out of that.
Right.
And this is, I share my experience with the guys. I said, because we're looking for truth. And I say, let's put all of our beliefs on the table.
Yeah.
And I said, we don't do this. This is not how you find truth.
Right.
And a man convinced against his will of the same opinion still. We put our beliefs on the table, because the reason I do prison ministry, because had I been caught, I sure would want someone to visit me. So it's the golden rule in action. So I was never incarcerated, because even when I was a quiet hour prison ministry director, there was a lady there telling everyone that I had been in prison. And I said, well, no, I only go voluntarily. But I'm on a work release program.
And that is not to say that you have not dabbled in some things for which you could have spent some time, but you weren't. So we praise the Lord for that.
Yeah, I was converted before I got caught.
All right.
Thank God. He was very gracious to me.
Yeah.
But my mother wrote in my 8th grade book, graduation book in public school, and it says, to my son Keith, may you find the love and hope I never found. Fight for what you want and get it. Trust only in God. He'll never let you down. Love, mother. Well, at 13, that was a cop-out. At 33, at her casket, that was a confession.
Yes.
And then I could have, and then the healing, could occur. And then all the women around me were safe from me now. You know, because I got all these minefields that were laid, you know. And so then I met this Adventist girl, and she showed me the love chapter. And she's going, it's my favorite text. And I'm getting electrocuted because my mom said, you know, may you find the love and hope I never found.
Yes.
Which, when you stop and think about that, you know, that was huge. And then, because I'd been divorced, this Adventist mother was concerned about her daughter, you know, because I have these stigmas of divorce. And I never wanted to be divorced, you know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have my sons and my family and always be together, but it's not the hand that was dealt, because you have no control over other people's choices. So we go to this psychologist, this Christian psychologist, and she says to me, as we have after prayer, she says, with the two of us in premarital counseling, she goes, what do you have to offer this woman? So I tell her what a husband should be, and she goes, that's very good. Now, what do you have to offer this woman? So I tell her what the spiritual husband should be, and she says, that's very good. Now, what do you have to offer this woman? And after I exhaust every adverb, adjective, noun, pronoun, conjunction, article, she says, that's really good. What do you have to offer this woman? And it's like God's got me where he wants me, because he's breaking me down. And the Marines broke me down, but he's breaking me down now. And he goes, then she says, do you love her because you need her, or do you need her because you love her? And at first, it went by kind of fast. I thought it was semantics. But then the Holy Spirit brings it back the second time, and I realize one is possessive, suffocating, insecure, you know, and that's what I witnessed. And the other one is healthy.
Yeah.
And so then as I'm reading the Bible, it says the pure heart. The seed sower says, you know, the good seed. And so I go on this quest to find freedom. And that love, you know, so love is very patient. I thought the 10 Commandments were tough until I ran into the love chapter. And it says that love is the fulfilling of the law. So when I bring this to my inmates, I ask them these 4 questions. Rhetorical questions. Can I share them? So the first one, I go, what would you do if I told you your youngest child was murdered? Would you want mercy or justice for the perpetrator? And you hear a lot of them go, justice. You know. And the second one is, what would you do if I told you the murderer was your oldest child? Do you want mercy or justice for the perpetrator? And they go, so a lot of them go, I have to think about that, which is no thought on the first one.
Right, right.
It's already ingrained, revenge. And some of them will say justice again, because they're trying now to be consistent. They want to not be hypocritical. So the third one goes, what would you do if I told you that you're guilty of the murder of the only begotten Son of God? You want mercy or justice as the perpetrator? And they'll try to say justice. And I go, well, then you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to get us to mercy, because mercy's not in our computer. You know, he has shown the young man what is good, what does the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, love mercy.
And walk humbly.
Walk humbly. And we love mercy when it's to me.
Yes.
But we don't dispense it.
Yeah. You want justice then.
We want justice then.
Sure.
Okay, so that's the hypocrisy of the gospel. And the fourth question is, what if I told you had a daughter, your only daughter? I'm doing my Asherick impersonation. I'm going 800 miles an hour, doing 4 1-hour sermons in 15 minutes. So you go like, what would you do if I told you had a daughter, your only daughter, the apple of your eye, who's never given you a moment's grief? And as a father, tonight you have your tux and hang in a closet, because tomorrow you're scheduled to walk her down the aisle and give her away to someone whom you approve. And the mother, because I taught Kohlberg and Gilligan, and the Kohlberg and Piaget would throw the women out as anomalies to their theories. Gilligan says caring, because women have twice the size of the limbic system. Okay, so I got to bring the women into the agape, prism. So I said, your wife has her dress hanging next to the gown that she's been planning and preparing since the first day she held her in her arms. But tonight she's at a bachelorette party. Her friends talk her into having one for the road, first ever in her life. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 later, on her way home, she wipes out a school bus, and everyone dies in a fiery inferno, but your daughter survives. You want mercy or justice for your daughter? And some will go, justice, and you go, I'm glad you're not my dad. I'm looking for mercy, And so I tell them, I said, what do the people related to those on the bus want? And they go, justice. I go, which is really revenge in a Madison Avenue package, because they want the government to do what they want to do. So the moral of the story is that the carnal nature has an ingrained sense of justice as long as it doesn't apply to them or theirs. And Satan knows we can only be forgiven according to our willingness to forgive.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And the irony is that we're all familia.
Yeah. And you actually walk prisoners through this. I mean, you take them to this regimen of steps in your instruction.
I have to bring them to the same page right away. Because Kohlberg says, when I came into church, I learned Kohlberg, 6 levels of moral development, says you can't skip steps. You can't get there without being brought, which is the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Well, if you try to do it on your own, it's more than works, but it's humanism to the max. But when you take it to the spiritual plane, it's dead on. I'll give you 3 examples of the steps in the Bible. Adam and Eve ran and hid from consequence.
Yes.
Then it says, in 1 Peter it says, you take the beating that you deserve with patience and you think this is commendable. And the inmates go, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So they're already ahead of Adam and Eve because they went into the blame game. And the third one is, blessed is he who takes the buffeting he doesn't deserve. This is commendable before God. We're not good at taking beatings we don't deserve. And Joseph and Job drive me crazy. What were they drinking? And give me a double. Because I'm looking for agape. Yeah. And the guys go, what are we studying today? I go, 1 Corinthians 13. They go, again? I go, I'm not here to make scribes and Pharisees. They're a dime a dozen. And I said, there's only one thing more dangerous than a baby with a chainsaw, and it's a carnal heart with a Bible. Because there's more atrocities in the name of God, with this, piranha mentality.
Yeah, that imagery is so striking. And you see that, I guess, in stark relief in prison ministry. And in listening to you, you're not a beat around the bush kind of guy. You kind of come after it.
Well, they go, Keith always comes in with the cement mixer, and I go, I didn't come in here to dance.
Yeah.
I says, I was raised with the Italians, and so they taught me vendetta. So I was really good at vendetta. But vendetta doesn't fit into agape. But you still sit there and say, I'm going to be as tactful as I can. And if you can't take tact, then I'm going to be a little more direct. And the reason why is because, like in the Marines, we're in a war. This isn't a game, And if I don't tell you the truth, then you're going to look at me and say, why didn't I tell you the truth? Yeah. And so I got involved in prison ministry, and what I kept looking at is, well, first of all, when I went to substitute teach to get my teaching credential, I saw kids in high school who couldn't read. And that told me that they're being passed along for time served, not for curriculum learned. And the conveyor belt is aimed right at our prisons.
Powerful imagery.
Because if you don't educate them, you're going to incarcerate them.
You're going to incarcerate them, yeah.
And education is not the silver bullet. Jesus is a silver bullet, but that doesn't guarantee not going to prison. Because inquisitions put you in prison. So at least you're going to go into prison like Daniel, or his 3 friends, because you were persecuted for righteousness' sake. Right. And bring it on. Okay. And so when you neutralize the guy, like the CDC sergeants would say, "What'd you do to Ortiz? Frankie Ortiz?" And he was at Maranatha, and he was the shot caller, and he's got more ink on him than an encyclopedia. 20 years in the system. You don't come any more lethal, but there's more. But that's hard to want to even comprehend. So they said, "What'd you do to Ortiz?" And I said, I gave the rebel without a cause a cause. Because I told him, no force, fear, intimidation, and manipulation in any and all relationships. That's the methodology of the beast. Wow. And then I have my 31 steps to freedom that I give them. And the 31st step, because I had to do it to me, is to wear your heart on your sleeve and not be vulnerable. But then these guys would grow. I'm the Quiet Hour Prison Ministries director for 16 years. And they would come in with me, the Pastor Tucker and the others, Dan Cotton and Maryland Sr., and they would see, these guys, incredible guys, because the love chapter heals. It's the anger management class, it's the parenting class, it's the relationship class. It is the silver bullet.
Keith, I got to ask you, did you start out wanting to go, and when you came out of Marines, you went to school, was prison ministry something you were shooting for, or did the Lord just kind of massage your life so that you ended up there? Because obviously you're a fit and you're doing great work there. Was that something you sort of aimed yourself towards, or the Lord kind of just moved you in that direction?
No, when I saw the kids being passed along and stuck in prison, that's what put me to the prison. I stopped going for my credential. I said, because if you're going to put them there, I'm going to go where you're putting them, because I have to. My conscience can't let me not let them go there, you know, unjustly. And even though I'm working with all these N numbers, narcotics violers, then Dr. Iacono, the neurosurgeon, he comes in and starts, for 11 years he's in the prison with me. And he died almost 4 years ago, June, the day before Father's Day. And he taught me about frontal lobes and stress and substance abuse, and how the frontal lobes, you know, can be eradicated, and the temporal lobes. And they're telling me about the neurotransmitters. So there's no serotonin, no melatonin, no frontal lobes. Now you have impaired rational choice. Now you're going to prison. Then he tells me from at 12 years old to 19 that the brain, going through puberty, the brain reshuffles the deck. And that our youth, it's really, you want to talk to God on this one. You know, how come when we reach the age of accountability, we're more vulnerable than a 12-day-old baby? I mean, we thought it was bad that when Pharaoh goes after the babies, you know, and Herod goes after the babies. But Satan comes after the 12 to 19 years old. When you send a 19-year-old, you know, whose frontal lobes are not fully developed into combat, they're going to take post-traumatic stress disorder harder than a 22 or 23-year-old. And if you hit a 12-year-old hard enough, you'll throw in the schizophrenia and there's no coming out.
Wow.
And so Bob dies, and I'm going, okay, God, how come Satan has 6,000 years of clinical neuroscience homework? You give me Bob to level the playing field, and then you take Bob. You know, and so here I am with this mantle. But no letters now. Who's going to give me credibility for the stuff that I've been doing all these years with the guys? Because, like, Bob says, their porch lights are out. So even though they would grow emotionally and spiritually, they would go out and come back because they were depressed, and they would chase the drug to try to get out of the depression. So Loma Linda's motto is to make men whole. Well, if you're going to go to prison, you better start working on all of it. And we have that, you know. We have the medical, we have the educational, we have the spiritual. And so Satan shudders at if we really put it together and go in there.
So integrity, International Development Corporation, a mouthful, is really the ministry that developed out of your burden to try to arrest this freight train that goes from uneducated, uninspired youth right basically to the gates of the prison. You're trying to break that cycle or interrupt that cycle, and once the cycle has been completed, to try to keep it from expanding, dare I say.
And so you got to turn it off from the bottom. So here comes the youth, and I want to run this 1-minute teaser of Dr. Amen's, because Bob told me about SPECT scans. And when you show them SPECT scans, then they roll over. Otherwise, you got this attitude, always did it, always will.
After we see this video, then I want to really walk through what SPECT scans are. This gives us a taste of that and sort of unpackage that and how that's integral in what you do and your ministry. Let's look at that just now.
Cigarettes were the first thing that I was introduced to.
Alcohol and cigarettes, drinking,
Smoked pot,
mushroom, ecstasy,
anything I could get my hands on to swallow.
prescription drugs,
Liquid acid, heroin,
cocaine,
Percocet, Percodan,
Vicodin, Valium.
and then God knows whatever the marijuana was laced with.
Your brain at 20, I would think this is a 70-year-old's brain.
Teenagers, adults, they have no clue that when they're smoking pot, they're actually damaging their brain.
Everything that I saw in school about it, I found out one day that it's all true and it's all happening to me.
When your brain works right, you work right.
I'd like to just be able to think normally.
What we're looking at here is a healthy brain.
I'm just worried that my brain cells are going to be gone and they're never coming back.
And this is a cocaine brain. So the real question is, which brain do you want?
What I get from that, Keith, is when young people innocently, maliciously, it really doesn't matter, expose themselves to these chemicals, they're doing long-term, perhaps irreparable damage to their brain and really dulling or incapacitating themselves to make good, conscious decisions. Yes or no?
Yes. And what happened to me, like, the guys finally told me that they were depressed. Well, my drug of choice was sports. So when you tell me you're depressed, we lost the World Series. Depression. When Bob and you got the chair of the psychology department, and you have nutritional biochemists, they all come in with me now, and they go, Keith, this is clinical depression. They're floundering in darkness. And you're going like, okay, well, how do you hold teachers accountable for people with no frontal lobes? And so Dr. Amen has this woman with ADD, IQ of 140, can't get through college. Gave her, he spec scanned her, which is a single emission, a single photon emission computerized topography. It's a blood scan. It's better, to me, it's better than PET and it's better than MRIs.
So you're looking at the brain.
You're looking at blood flow.
Blood flow in the brain.
Active blood flow. So he asked this woman with an IQ 140 to do a mental math problem, and her frontal lobe shut down in front of him on the spec. And so he gives her, a small dose of Ritalin so she could focus, and she blows through college. Because, so between, ADD, ADHD, and everything starts from not sleeping. And if we leave a night light on in an infant's room, we're impairing frontal lobe development. And in the prisons, they don't turn the lights out. So they're coming out more psychotic than when they went in.
Wow.
Because it takes serotonin, darkness, and sleep, to get into REM, to defrag the hard drive. Well, they'll sleep, but they won't get in REM. And so when we show the posters to the kids of the brain, and you see the holes, you see the normal brain, if we could bring that picture up on the poster, and you can see the two center, like the yellow one in the center is the normal top, and the one next to it is the normal bottom. And you see marijuana, smoking, inhalants, cocaine, meth, and alcohol. And then if we throw caffeine in there with coffee and all the other stimulants, Satan is just having a field day on us. And I'm going like, how do you get ready for Jesus if your frontal lobes aren't there, and how do you be sealed with no frontal lobes? So that should be the brunt of our message.
And isn't it interesting that the vast majority of these drugs, be they over the counter, be they something you can buy at the local coffee emporium or something illegal you get in a back alley, work on the frontal lobe, which is what you need to serve the Lord, to make those kinds of decisions we've been talking about.
Now I'm going to show you about the importance of melatonin. Because melatonin retards aging. It's what Ponce de Leon was looking for. Okay, so let's bring on the faces of meth, because on the previous little teaser, Dr. Amen tells that young man that you're 20 years old and you have a brain of a 70-year-old.
Yes.
So with no melatonin, has accelerated aging. Now you can see the body playing catch up. Look at these are the booking records, 5 years later, and you see that the skin is deteriorating, the nose and ears continue to grow, but look at the life coming out of the skin. And then the next one, this is what, look at this. 3 years, 5 months later, between booking records.
Wow.
So when I show this to the kids, and the next one is this person using real hard, and so he's on the death knell because he's sucking up. Okay. When I show this to the youth, at-risk youth with the police and the probation departments, and at first they're there because they don't want to be there. They drop their bodies off and they're going to come back and pick them up later. And I bring my professor, and I show them. And so when they see these pictures, the one girl goes, well, that chick was ugly going in. And so I look at her and I says, well, you stay on this path, pretty soon every day is Halloween and you won't need a mask. Because if it's vanity I have to get you off of it, I'm going to hit you.
We'll go there,
any way I can hit you to say you're dying. This is not the solution. And I got to shut the spigot off from coming from the bottom so I can, stop the recidivism from the top, so we can stop wasting that money in prisons and put it in education. And spiritual renewals. You
don't pull punches when you I'll use the term minister, but it's not, you didn't come to bring cookies and milk. You came to bring a sword. It's tough stuff.
I want them to stay home with their parents. I mean, to their families. And these guys when they're in prison, that's post-traumatic stress. You're being damaged more. Prison hurts you. It's not fun. Being at Maranatha, when I could be in there for 40 plus hours a day, I'm in heaven. To go after these guys, and they go, like, I'll be walking by them and they'll go, my wife just sent me this letter, what should I do? I says, you have a Bible? No. I go, do you have a Bible? Yeah. Can you borrow it? I go, turn to 1 Corinthians 13, read it, and if you have a better definition of 1 Corinthians 13 of what love is, put it on the table.
Yeah, yeah.
But until then, you know, this is it, you know. And I go, if you buy into it, because right now you're not fit for man or beast, when you let that heal you, then she's not going to divorce you. When the rarest commodity on this planet is a spiritual man or woman. And when you're spiritual, you have to beat her off with a stick, you know. And so this is where we go. We just stay on the love chapter and education. I'm doing my doctorate, you know, in criminal justice. I'm the first to have a master's in correctional and alternative education, because without Bob, I mean, I had his academic, scientific, medical muscle, and you go, bring it on, sick him, Bob, you know. And so I need another neurosurgeon, you know, who's just as aggressive and open-minded and heart beating for Christ. And we need the psychiatrist who can do the scans. And we have all that. It's when we put that all on the table, no one's going to run with us. Like, I want to redo Steps to Christ. I want to, because my inmates.
Yeah, I love that idea.
My inmates are teaching an addict's 12 steps to Christ. And so we have the 12 step of Wilson's in there, and then I have all the Bible verses. And then we break down the chapters and showing them where the steps are. And then we have, I wrote this paper called Pathways to Recovery, which talks about circadian rhythm. Iacono and I, we self-published a paper called Silent Trauma, Puberty, and Incarceration. Put that in the back with another one that we have to write, which has to do with education, exercise, and diet, and sleep. So it's basically the New Start program.
Yeah, okay? It occurred to me.
And we put it in there, and we have a workbook so they can work the steps, you know, and then we put it in blue because it's the blue book that Wilson has. And then I want to put Nathan Green's Unshackled on the cover.
Wow.
And then bring it on. And so, like, I want Obama to see this video. You know, I want, you know, Arnie Duncan. You know, these are just my Chicago guys. Okay? You're from Chicago, so let's get it on now. And if anyone else, any politicians, you know, if you're really serious in education and saving our youth and saving our country, the only way we're going to win the war against drugs is from the demand side. And when we educate them, the young moms who are innocently leaving a light on in their baby's bedroom, and it takes till 25 years old before the frontal lobes are fully engaged, and the kids are bipolar, and I go, so how are you sleeping? I've never been able to sleep. And so then ADD and ADHD and all these people, adolescent antisocial personality disorders, they're all high risk to self-medicate. And like I have this one guy, at the prison. At 4th grade, he took an intestinal injury, had to have surgery on in the summer of 4th grade. So they're giving him all these painkillers all summer long, and these painkillers activating serotonin and depleting it. So when melatonin drops to a certain point, it tells the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, it's puberty time. So in 5th grade, he went through premature puberty, and he has all his body hair. But now there's no serotonin. They depleted it. It wasn't his fault. And now, you know, he can't sleep. He has a sleeping disorder because there's no serotonin to make melatonin, you know, to tell the brain it's safe to go into REM. And by 8th grade, he self-medicated, a full-blown alcoholic, and then kept next step. And it all started from surgery. And so Iacono always told me that it takes tryptophan and B6 to make serotonin. But there's no guarantee. There's a 25% chance it's going to go there. It could become a protein, and that's good. Could make niacin, and that's wonderful. You know, or it could make serotonin, and that's ding, 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 ding. But if you're under stress, it can make quinolinate, which is a toxin which depletes serotonin.
Wow. You know, Keith, you've talked about so many things, and I want to, before our time gets away from us, to try to make it a little more secular. I mean, as simple as making sure that the night light is out in your baby's bedroom, or, you know, because the other night my wife and I turned off the light. We were sitting up in bed and we said, look at all the lights on in here. There's a flashing light from the television set. There's a light on from the clock radio. There's a light on, she has a little laptop computer that is that's on. The phone is in the charger. That light is on. I said, this room is not dark. It's a mass of lights. So that if we have to get up and go to the restroom or something at night, the room is well lit. You know, it's not dark. So it's as easy as darkening the room so that the brain and the body can do what it needs to do will help begin to arrest that cycle of sending children on a pipeline to prison.
And it's like, before Edison gave us electricity, everyone followed circadian rhythm on default. You had to burn the oil, we had to go make the oil, so they went to bed early.
Yeah.
And so then Edison came, and then when the television found its way into the bedroom, was our death knell. Because my friends go, I can't sleep without the TV on, and you go, you ain't sleeping with the TV on.
Right, yeah, you're not. Yeah.
And Iacono would say, if you took a cat, I have all these Iaconoisms, you know. and he's my heart and soul, other than Christ. But he said, if you take a cat and you put it in the center of a lagoon, you know, on a 12-inch diameter pedestal, 2 inches above the water, and you put a cat on it, the cat's disdain for water, the cat will take cat naps. He says in 24 hours, it'll be psychotic going, meow, meow, meow. Our guys in prison are doing the same thing.
Wow.
So they're trying to put this stuff on, but you can't cover your eyes and stop it because it can hit the skin, and it just knows. I got this paper that blind people have a sleeping disorder.
Wow. You know? Yeah.
They don't know the lights are on.
Yeah.
And so, like, the full moon coming in your bedroom can stop melatonin synthesis. And like Iacono, when he told me with Parkinson's, you know, it was always stress-related, major stress. Like Iacono would say, you know, God gave us adrenaline to get us over a hump. It was never intended to be a 3 and a 4 and a 5-year hump.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's going to take its toll. First, it's going to put you in depression. He says the first to go is smell, then the blink rate, then the flaccid face, and hopefully tremor. Because type 2 Parkinson's is going to take you out fast. Because then the dopamine starts backing out. And so Bob would go, you're a neurologist. And I'm going, in your world of Iacono, but no one else is going to recognize it as a neurologist. But when we're looking at Kohlberg, like, if I can, I don't think we have time to go into my doctorate, but my dissertation thing, but it was, there's just so much. And I'm just, you know, glad we were able to.
Yeah, we got a little more time, and I want to, because again, you've touched on so many things. The prison system as currently constructed then is not really rehabilitating, and you're trying to arrest that also, or do something to change that, you know, in your courses and in your time in the prison.
Now you're stepping on an atrocity.
Yeah.
Oligarchy, paramedical, top-down, force to compliance breeds anarchy, and it makes monsters, because force will just beget force. And in my classes, I learned about Captain Alexander McConaughey, Thomas Mott Osborne, and there was 2 others, bringing them off the top of my head, who did prison reform, and they couldn't wait to get rid of them to go back to force. And you go like, but it's the kindness of God that draws us to repentance.
Yes, yes. Yeah, but the mindset is, and we realize that as Christians, that you do win more and do more with love than with coercion or with force. And yet, the mindset in the system is, we got to make these guys do this stuff. We got to force these guys to do this stuff. That's how we rehabilitate. That's how we do it. So you're saying we need to come from a whole different deck, dare I say, in trying to deal with that population.
Kohlberg, stage 1 is law and punishment. And the more conservative you get on that, the more extreme is your punishment. So the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And if you go over here on stage 1 liberal, you know, it's promiscuity to the max.
Yeah.
And I'm not going there. So I draw this plane of stage 1 and I go, this is agape. You know, and if it's 6 levels up, I go, there's 6 levels down to anarchy and the searing of the conscience. And they're pretty much down in this level because of carnality. But they go, you're a liberal. And I go, no, I'm an agapeist. And I want 144,000 agapeists who you can't intimidate.
Yes.
They're not afraid to die, you know, because of the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and live not their lives unto the death.
Unto death, correct.
So,
yeah.
So when Satan knows that he can't intimidate you, and you're going to love him while you're Stephen doing your Stephen impersonation, he shudders at the thought of 144,000, be it spiritual or literal. Either way, it's his worst nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, because they got 144,000 Christ-like spiritual monsters. You know, and but going back to, I want to just mention my dissertation. My dissertation, I can't use incarcerates. No matter how compliant, because the inmates, when I show them this stuff, they go, "Can it be fixed? And when can I be scanned?"
Yeah.
And then there's a young kid who fell on the stairs at 22 months, and his frontal lobes were turned to mashed potatoes. In Amen's book, and he says he will never be able to self-govern. Well, at least if you spec scan them, you know why, and you can treat them humanely. You do a triage.
Yeah.
So you can go after the ones that we can spec and heal. And if we can start taking the youth that start acting out, and then we can start, you know, dealing with their adolescent undiagnosed teen depression, and then help them, you know, to adapt. And I think we can do major saving of our youth and emptying of our prisons. But, you know, it's hard fighting stage one mentalities of law and punishment.
Yeah, yeah. So your quest then, your plea is to come at this a whole different way than basically crime and punishment or revenge. And I think the first four questions you asked, you know, if someone does wrong, you want revenge, or you may call it justice. But if it's your own child that committed that crime, then the equation shifts a little bit.
Mrs. Dahmer cried when her son went to prison in that. Her love was unconditional. She hated what he did.
Right.
But the love for the child doesn't go away. You just can't throw a switch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so when your child is incarcerated, you have a different look at the system. Everyone else goes, throw them, kill them all, and let God sort them out.
Yeah.
That's a frontal lobe I want to scan because I know it's empty.
Well, that is pretty hardcore. You know?
No,
it is, yeah.
I mean, there's no mercy and no compassion, and the two, like I rechanged Kohlberg's 6 levels, and I put level 5. He called it post-conventional. I put it mercy and compassion, and the two make agape. And everything else here is like legalism and quasi-legalism, because it's loaded with hypocrisy. Yeah. And until it's truly converted. And when I show this to the guys, and when you have a young man raped 2 hours before your class, 22 years old, or you have a young man who never saw his son in person, and he's showing you his baby pictures, and they call him in because a medevac is talking to him that his 3-month-old baby was just beaten to death by the mother's new boyfriend beyond recognition, and do you want to donate the body parts?
Yeah, I saw that. That actually happened.
Yes.
He's incarcerated.
We taped it on the Quiet Hour, and we broadcast his testimony coming out of the prison, and how 1 Corinthians 13, when he went back to his rack, because the officers were crying because God gave us empathy. And when you hear that of a baby, you know. Yeah. And so he goes back to his bunk, and all the carnal passions rise. And he gets out of his rack, and he gets on his knees, and he prays for God to forgive him for these feelings. And then he gets back in his rack, and he writes 2 letters. He writes one to the DA requesting not to pursue the death penalty. He writes another one to the jail where the young man is being incarcerated. Wow. Awaiting now trial. We get a letter back from the chaplain who read his letter to the young man with a guard as a witness, and the guy's apathetic, and he's throwing the switch in there, and it doesn't look like he has any remorse, but it's going on in there. Yeah, he's numb. Yeah. And so he says, this is his letter, he goes, I forgive you and God forgives you. No, he goes, God loves you and I love you, and God forgives you and I forgive you, and I pray that you'll accept God's most gracious offer of his son,
Wow.
Because he's forgiven me for the heinous things I've done in my life.
Yeah.
And
That a guy
what
could
level is
write
that?
letter, yeah.
What level is that?
Yeah.
In prison. And so, like I said, Iacono would be doing these neuro evaluations outside of the chapel, waiting for him to unlock the prison. And here's this one guy, he's just rock solid. He says, well, if we had indeterminate sentencing, he says, you could go home. He goes, I can't go home, Doc. He goes, why? He goes, I have 8 more years. He said, but you could go home now. He says, you're sound. You're more sound than the people on the street. And he goes, I wouldn't go if I could. He goes, what? He says, the guys need me. And Bob looks at me and goes, I don't see that kind of humanity on the streets.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible.
So when you sit there and see, like, and then you look at, in the wars in the POW camps, you have the anarchists, the eye for the iris, and the turn the other cheekers. And how do these turn the other cheekers overcome hate?
Wow.
So that's what I pursue. Whenever I see the sign that God's done this hardcore transformation, I'm on it. I want it, and I present it to my guys. So when I do my master's, my guys went through the master's with me. Now I'm doing my doctorate, and these guys are going through the doctorate with me, and they're going like, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So they go, no one comes in and teaches what you teach.
Right. Prison can then be a transformational experience if these kinds of principles are put into play. Our time has really fast slipped by. I'm going to have to go to a news break, then we'll come back and try to put a little bow on this and tie it up before we go. Let's go to the news break just now.
Hello, I'm Molly Steenson, and we here at 3ABN are thrilled to use the latest technology to reach our ever-increasing world audience. I remember when 3ABN first began broadcasting on satellite television in 1986. We were thrilled then as well to reach thousands of home satellite dish owners across the United States. And before the first program was over, the calls began coming in. It was also exciting to see the Lord opening doors for new television downlink stations that greatly increased our viewership. Then came the wonderful day when we began broadcasting across the ocean to audiences in Europe, South America, and finally to the whole world. And as God made this possible, we added a new radio network and more television channels to our ministry. Today, in addition to making 3ABN, 3ABN Latino, 3ABN Proclaim, and 3ABN Radio available on satellite, you can watch all 6 of our television channels and listen to 3ABN Radio over the internet. To watch, just visit 3abn.org and click the Watch Now button to select a television channel. In addition to our English broadcast, you can watch Spanish and Portuguese language programs on 3ABN Latino. For those who enjoy preaching and teaching, we have 3ABN's Proclaim channel offering 24-hour Christ-centered programming. Children will love watching the Sunbeam channel with programs like Kids Time, Janice's Attic, and Grandma's House. And our brand new Dare to Dream Urban channel offers practical Christ-centered programs emphasizing a healthy lifestyle, drug addiction recovery, marriage enrichment, and much more. And last but not least, millions who speak Russian can now enjoy our 3ABN Russian channel programs, developed and produced by our talented studio workers in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. Our 3ABN radio network is available from our website as well at 3abnradio.org. Check out all the ways to listen on your computer or listen to us anywhere on your smartphone through our MP3 and 3G mobile phone streams. If you're one of the many precious people who have blessed us with your faithful prayers and financial support, I say thank you. And if you haven't, won't you ask the Lord what He would have you do to support 3ABN's ministry? And if the Holy Spirit impresses you, please send your tax-deductible gifts to 3ABN, Post Office Box 220, West Frankfort, Illinois 62896. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all that you do to further the cause of Christ.
We have covered so very, very much. I want to give Keith's contact information so that should you want to contact him, bring this program to your church, to your area, here's how you can do precisely that.
If you would like to know more about this ministry, write to them at Integrity International Development Corporation, Inc., 10282 Sahara Road, Phelan, California, 92371. You may also call them at area code 760-868-5925 or visit them online at keithajohnson.homestead.com.
If you're like me, your head is spinning because we've covered so very, very much. Suffice it to say that there is a shift in how we handle inmates and how we cut off the cycle of prison and incarceration. Our time has fast slipped into eternity. Allow me now in closing to wish you both grace and peace through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye and God bless.